It's been a good week. It's been a crazy week. Oh my goodness. Like, I thought the week was just going to be about comedy in London. And then Israel and Iran happened. You try tell jokes when there's missiles outside. Like, everyone was here, like... Because that would be a weird way, like, to be, you know what I mean? Like, at the beginning of World War III. And then we were on, like, the brink of, like, World War III. Like, you here are now a Friday crowd having fun. Monday, Tuesday crowd. Oof.
Bombs for peace and an F-bomb to top it off. That's not a punchline, it actually happened. Donald Trump didn't just fracture diplomatic norms, he shattered them with bunker busters and a profanity-laden national address. Millions scratched their heads, but Trevor Noah had the last laugh. Want to know how war became the new peace treaty? Keep watching. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. What do you call it when you drop bombs and call it peace? Apparently it's diplomacy Trump style. This was no ordinary moment in U.S. Iran relations. In a decision more confusing than his grammar and midnight tweets, Donald Trump chose to bomb Iran's nuclear sites. Not to start a war, mind you, but to de-escalate tensions. Yes, de-escalate. Only in the world of Trump does a 30,000-pound bomb qualify as a peace offering.
Like, people are like, where were you? When you're like, did you see what happened? No, I didn't. Where were you? Trevor was telling us about Brixton. Iran was negotiating a nuclear deal with America. Negotiating a deal. They're making progress. They're getting close. They're getting super close. And then Israel was like, no deal. And then Israel started launching missiles at Iran. The whole world was like, man, this again, Middle East conflict, Middle East. And then at the peak of it, everyone was like, man, how could this get worse? Donald Trump was like, hello.
Targets were key Iranian nuclear facilities buried inside mountains, which Trump claimed needed obliterating. And obliterate they did. Home to Iran's nuclear enrichment efforts, sites like Fordow and Natanz were hit with a full payload of bunker buster bombs and Tomahawk missiles. These weren't backyard fireworks. A single strike could mimic a small-scale earthquake. But here's the kicker. Trump didn't bother asking Congress for approval. You know, the people meant to check the president on decisions this extreme? Apparently democracy was on a coffee break that day. This marked a sharp pivot from the America First campaign Trump rode to victory in 2016. His repeated promises to avoid military quagmires, especially in the Middle East, were tossed aside in epic Trump fashion. Remember, this is the same guy who delivered endless speeches criticizing Obama for his interventions in Libya and declaring, with his usual flair, that endless wars were a disaster. Yet somehow raining destruction on another country's nuclear sites felt like perfectly good policy under President Trump. Perhaps the only thing bigger than the bombs was the contradiction itself. What really sealed the absurdity of it all was Trump's declaration that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Yes, those were his actual words.
Donald Trump came in and he was like, I'm gonna help. I'm gonna totally de-escalate this situation. I'm gonna de-escalate this situation. And we were like, my man, you've never de-escalated a thing in your life. But Trump came in and he's like, I don't like how Iran and Israel are launching bombs at each other all the time. So many bombs, we can't have this, it's not right. Too many bombs, we gotta stop it. And no one expected it. Like, the whole world was like, okay, Trump is gonna mediate, or because he said to them, hey guys, let's sort this out, peace deal. We're gonna do a peace deal. And then he dropped bombs on Iran.
At least he wasn't calling it beautiful, although you half assume that was next. In his speech following the attacks, Trump took full credit for what he framed as a win for America's might, saying the targets had been completely and totally obliterated. Never mind the irony of trying to downplay violence while openly bragging about the size of your explosions. But Trump wasn't playing to logic, he was playing to the cameras, spinning chaos into victory for his base. What about the rest of the world? That's when things got awkward. Allies like Germany and France Natanz, who had been trying to salvage the Iran nuclear deal Trump scrapped in 2018, responded with a mix of shock, jaw-dropping, and probably some unprintable words about American foreign policy. Even Trump's closer allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia, wondered just how far this could spiral. And while all of this unfolded, the military-industrial complex must have been sharing champagne. After all, nothing pays like precision-guided missiles for peace. Meanwhile, Iran, defying cliché expectations of swift retaliation, decided to channel their inner chess master. Rather than unleashing chaos, they made a move that left everyone stunned. Get this, before retaliating, they gave the US a heads up. Yes, Iran warned the United States in advance, a callback to the days when diplomacy didn't involve exploding buildings. This kind of restraint was so out of place, it felt like a scene from an absurdist comedy where the enemy ends up acting like the responsible one in the room. If anything, it left Trump scrambling for words, or at least sensible ones, which weren't exactly his specialty. This diplomatic gesture in the middle of military madness added a layer of complexity no one saw coming. It's as if Iran, rather than escalating, wanted to prove a point.
Like, he also doesn't know what he's doing. He's in it with us, which is a nice change. Oftentimes we're at the mercy of those in power, but he's in the mercy with us. Earlier today, the United States military, that's us, launched missiles, bunker busters, launched missiles on Iran. And the reason I say this is because Trump came out and he hosted a press conference about it. It was so wild. He hosted a press conference about dropping the bombs.
Whether it was to expose the contradictions in Trump's aggressive messaging or to maintain their standing in the global community, the warning shocked officials and media alike. Of course, Trump still didn't miss the opportunity to spin it all, suggesting it was his strength that forced such restraint. Because in Trump world, everything revolves around Trump. But while Iran was trying to play the adult, the strikes had ripple effects that extended far beyond the Middle East. Take Kareem Sajjadpour, a scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, who openly questioned whether Trump had thought past the initial explosions. He raised concerns about everything from possible attacks on embassies to Iran mining the Strait of Hormuz. And Sajjadpour wasn't alone. Critics wondered if these bombings would destabilize the Iranian regime further, or worse, unite them against a common enemy, the US. You know your foreign policy's a mess when allies and experts can't decide whether you're strengthening your opponent or just ruining the chances of future negotiations. And here's the ultimate irony. Trump's actions blurred the line so much between peacekeeping and provocation that nobody, not even his supporters, seemed to know what the goal was anymore. Was it a show of American power, a prelude to further conflict, a re-election stunt? All we know for sure is whatever peace Trump was chasing, it came wrapped in bombs loud enough to echo across Twitter feeds for days. If confusing the world was an art, Trump Michelangelo edit here. Allies were baffled, critics were relentless, and the international stage was left questioning whether this so-called de-escalation was the diplomatic equivalent of throwing gasoline on a campfire. But if you thought the bombs were shocking, just wait. We haven't even gotten to the part where Trump surprises us with something much smaller but far louder. Stay tuned. Who needs carefully crafted diplomacy when you can just curse on live television? That's exactly what happened on the night Trump addressed the nation after Iran's retaliation. Picture this. The world held its breath, expecting a somber, measured response to rising tensions in the Middle East. With one side launching missiles and the other dropping bunker-busting bombs, the stakes couldn't have been higher. But instead of delivering clarity or calm, Trump's speech veered way off course into a moment that would overshadow even the shocking military actions themselves. Somewhere between the teleprompter and his temper, President Trump said what no one expected and no other president would dare. He dropped an F-bomb. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't a slip of the tongue caught off mic. This was live on camera, with every major news network broadcasting it to millions. Trump let frustration boil over, directing a profanity-riddled comment not just at Iran, but also at Israel, his supposed ally. The exact words? Well, for the sake of not getting demonetized here, let's just say he called their handling of the whole situation a furying disaster. You could practically hear the collective gasp from both supporters and critics. The President of the United States unraveling under pressure and swearing his way through a global crisis, because apparently diplomacy and self-control weren't invited to this party. It didn't take long for the F-bomb to hijack the headline.
And so now, because America had dropped bombs on them, then Iran had to respond, but then Iran didn't want to get into a fight. No one wants to get into a fight with America, you know what I mean? And so like Iran was like, we are going to retaliate against you. And then they launched missiles at an American base in Qatar. And then Trump, very, like in an interesting way, he responded to Iran. Then he wrote on his like thing online on his profile, he was like, thank you to Iran for giving us notice about the bombs. Now it's over, it's all over. There will be peace. Like out of nowhere they came and they were like, Iran launched more missiles. And then everyone was like, wait, what missiles? And Israel was like, you launched missiles. And everyone was like, no, And then Israel was like, too late, we're coming for you with more bombs.
Bombs, F-bombs, and a Nobel Peace Prize. Who else but Donald Trump could believe this was a winning formula? Yes, Trump genuinely thought that raining destruction on Iran while throwing temper tantrums on live TV would cement his legacy as a peacemaker. You might wonder, was there anyone in Trump's circle brave enough to say, sir, maybe bombing doesn't scream Nobel Prize material? If they existed, they were probably escorted out of the room. Because to Trump, that shiny trophy was the ultimate validation, and in his eyes, he had already earned it. This wasn't just a passing thought for Trump, it was an obsession. His allies, ever eager to feed his ego, took it a step further by repeatedly nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. A Ukrainian lawmaker nominated him once, citing his efforts in the Middle East peace agreements. Others pointed to his tough stance on North Korea, and Trump, in classic Trump fashion, didn't exactly play coy about it. He repeatedly dropped unsubtle hints during his speeches, once even complaining that Obama didn't even know what he won for. For Trump, anything Obama had, he wanted more of, and ideally, bigger. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Bombing Iran doesn't really build a strong case for the Peace Prize. Even in the most generous interpretation, Trump's actions were the textbook opposite of what the award symbolizes. His strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, which he proudly called a spectacular military success, escalated regional tensions while alienating U.S. allies. Diplomacy took a backseat to aggression, and restraint seemed about as distant as his grasp of geography. This wasn't the strategy of a peacemaker. It was the strategy of a reality TV star trying to script a dramatic finale. The irony of Trump's ambitions wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. While he imagined himself in Oslo delivering a triumphant acceptance speech, the chaos he sowed was having the opposite effect. Allies in Europe, like France and Germany, were vocal in their disapproval of his trigger-happy approach, especially after he shredded the Iran nuclear deal they had worked so hard to maintain. Even closer allies, like Israel, were left wondering if Trump's impulsive decisions were helpful or just adding fuel to an already volatile situation. What happened next was almost poetic. Some of Trump's nominators quietly withdrew their support. That Ukrainian lawmaker who once championed him, gone. Disillusionment crept into the narrative as they questioned whether Trump's actions in Iran and beyond truly served the cause of peace. To be fair, a few loyal supporters doubled down, praising him for strength and insisting that peace through aggression was still peace. It just goes to show how polarizing Trump's legacy had become, even among those who put his name forward for a Nobel Prize. Karim Sajjadpour, a scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, didn't buy the idea of Trump the peacemaker for a second. He questioned the real consequences of Trump's decision to bomb Iran. Would it stop Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon? Or would it expedite the process out of sheer defiance? Would it weaken the regime or, ironically, strengthen it by uniting them against a common enemy? Sajjadpour's analysis painted a bleak picture of long-term instability, a world left holding its breath, hoping Trump's mess wouldn't spiral into something even worse. But hey, at least Trump had successfully obliterated a few mountains. The fallout didn't just stop at foreign policy. Trump's Peace Prize pipe dream became increasingly hard to sell, even to those sympathetic to him. Rolling Stone pointed out how Trump's actions, despite his claims of being anti-war, mirrored the pro-war tendencies of previous administrations. They called his track record profoundly neocon, a term that cuts deep for someone who prided himself on being an outsider. Instead of walking away with a shiny medal, Trump was left with a growing reputation as a destabilizing force. Not exactly Nobel material. Of course, that didn't stop his circle from inflating his ego. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt once gushed about Trump's actions, claiming no other president in history could have ever dreamed of such a success. The sheer hyperbole of statements like this only added to the absurdity. It wasn't just that Trump believed he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. It was that his team actively worked to make it seem inevitable. But for everyone else, the idea of Trump winning the Nobel felt less like an achievement and more like satire. The Washington Post summed it up perfectly. Trump's pursuit of the Nobel Peace Prize was a glaring contradiction. Bombing Iran while calling it a diplomatic victory just made his ambitions look ridiculous. Instead of building his credibility on the world stage, his actions did the opposite. The notion that a man who escalates conflicts might be celebrated as a champion of peace became a global punchline. And to no one's surprise, the committee behind the Nobel Prize wasn't exactly rushing to give him a call. So did Trump's chaotic diplomacy bring him closer to his dream of clutching that golden medallion? Not exactly. If anything, it backfired spectacularly, turning his quest for validation into yet another story of overreach. The Nobel Peace Prize became less a symbol of accomplishment for Trump and more a symbol of the disconnect between his fantasy and the reality of his decisions. It was like submitting a disaster movie to the Oscars and calling it a documentary. What's the lesson here? Well, maybe it's a reminder that actions speak louder than press conferences. Or maybe it's just another chapter in the chaotic theater that was Trump's presidency. Either way, what he didn't win says as much about his legacy as what he did. Let's just say, in Trump's world, peace had a pretty loud explosion. Trump's bombs for peace approach didn't just challenge diplomacy, it turned it into a late-night comedy bit. Trevor Noah summed it up best, calling it proof we'd entered a ludicrous timeline. Bombing Iran and branding it as de-escalation shattered not only political norms, but global expectations. It was as if diplomacy clicked into reverse and somehow kept driving. The real question isn't just why this happened, but what it says about leadership today. If lobbing missiles comes with Nobel dreams, what's next for accountability? One thing's certain, when reality gets this absurd, the punchlines practically write themselves. Stay tuned.